Dear Mother, welcome to Sanamama, a space to honour the unspoken truths of mothering, where birth and death, joy and heartbreak intertwine. Here we hold space for the stories we don't always share, beyond the polished ideals and into the raw and real, through the tender spaces of loss, life, and everything in between. For the mothers who carry their children in their arms, and for those who carry them in their hearts, Sanamama is a place to explore the infinite ways mothering shapes and reshapes us. May we grieve, connect, and celebrate together, to embrace the messy, beautiful truth of this journey, and to remind one another that none of it has to be carried alone. This is Sanamama, a letter to all mothers. Hi Madee.
Hi Lisa.
Thank you so much for coming, and I'm really honoured to share your story and privileged to be here with your boys today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course.
It's so nice to listen to other women's stories, and I really just wanted to share mine. If it gives anyone some hope on their fertility journey or makes someone feel less alone, then that's positive.
I had tears in my eyes when I was reading what you'd shared with me when you reached out to share your story, and
It's big. It's big.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I would love to know about your journey into motherhood and what that's looked like for you, because I know you've got some older children and then some younger children, and how that journey's taken shape over the last 20 years of your life, I guess.
Yep. So I became a mum at 19 to a beautiful baby called Arthur, who's now 16, almost 17. It was pretty traumatic. The pregnancy was easy, and my waters broke at home. But I suppose I was young. I didn't understand my body as much as I do now. And I birthed in hospital. Lots of people not listening to me. I ended up, long story short, I had a 4-day labour. That ended up having a natural birth and almost drug-free.
Wow.
And then I loved motherhood so much, I went back, decided to have another one 9 months later. I fell pregnant 9 months later, so my boys have got 17 months and 17 days difference. Charles was 15, and that birth was totally different. It was, I think, 3 hours. Still at hospital, but I understood the progression of labour and the pain, and understood my body more, and so that was a really nice birth. I then got divorced, and so I didn't think I was ever going to have any more children until I met my husband Bob. And Bob and I fell pregnant and had another fuss-free, beautiful pregnancy, and had a very quick labour again at the hospital. It was about 45 minutes, I think, of active labour.
By the time you got to the hospital?
I felt uncomfortable being at home, and because my last labour had been 3 hours, and we were in Bellingen, so I have a 30-minute drive to the hospital. So, I wasn't sure if I was in active labour at that point, but I felt like something was progressing. It was my due date too. So George was born on his due date. He was also born on my oldest boy's dad's birthday, which is funny, because at that point, the older boy's dad wasn't in their life. So it was like George had been sent to look after them for that time. That was amazing. We bonded as a family over this bundle of joy. George is so spoiled. It's like he has 4 parents because the age gap between Arthur and Charles and George is 8 years.
Yeah.
And then we got married in April 2022 and decided to try for another baby after. I fell pregnant on my wedding night. And we had another beautiful pregnancy. I felt like that one was a little bit harder. I felt like I was a little bit older, but no problems whatsoever. I was due on Christmas Day, and I was really worried about having my baby. Having a baby on Christmas Day and them having to share their day.
Juggling, like, how are we going to do presents and Christmas with a birthday?
Yeah, and that was my biggest concern, which is nice, I guess, because now my concerns are a lot bigger. And so we had an amazing Christmas Day. And we ate lots of food. We went for a swim in my mother-in-law's pool. We had lots of presents. And I didn't feel or notice that anything might have been wrong. I was distracted. I was happy. And then I felt my body go into natural labour. So I was at home and I had a shower and did all the normal things, paced around the house. Then my waters broke at home and I thought, I better get to hospital quickly. So I made some coffees and our entire family piled in the car because so Arthur and Charles were at George's birth as well. And the whole family wanted to be at Albert's birth. So we piled in the car on very early Boxing Day morning and went to Maxville, which was a birthing centre instead of a hospital, so there's no doctors. But I was very confident. I'd given birth so many times before, and and I got to Maxville and the midwives tried to find the heartbeat and they kept blaming the Doppler. And at this point, I still didn't really think that anything was wrong. That wasn't my story. I had an ultrasound at 39 weeks and everything was fine. I was 40 weeks and 1 day. And so they tried to do a lactic or something to attach something to his head to try and get the heartbeat. But again, that didn't work. And they said I'd need to be transferred to Coffs. My mum had to drive my huge car home, which she's never driven before, with Arthur and Charles and George in the car because they couldn't be there at 3 o'clock in the morning. And as I was in the back of the ambulance going to Coffs from Maxville, I was more concerned. I was tracking my mum. I was more concerned about if she was going to be okay driving my car. I then got to Coffs Hospital. It was the quickest trip ever. Lights and sirens and everything. And I was 7 centimetres when we'd left Maxville, so I knew it was going to be quick. I got rushed into maternity where a doctor was waiting for me and with an ultrasound machine. And she did an ultrasound and she didn't even make eye contact with me. Like, couldn't even look at me. It was just like a nod of the head and she left the room. And my amazing midwife, who's also called Madee, she just looked at me and she said, "This is going to be the hardest thing you've ever had to do." And I knew. But I got through the labour, I think, because there was still that wishful thinking, still that thought of maybe he'll cry when he's born. Maybe this was just all a dream. But he was gorgeous. This is Albert. He was my biggest baby at £8.12.
Wow.
Yeah. and absolutely perfect in every way. We had an autopsy done. We wanted to know exactly what happened so we could not have it happen to us again. And he, again, confirmed he was perfect. He had a nuchal cord, so the umbilical cord was around his neck twice. It was seen on the ultrasound to be around his neck once at 39 weeks. About 30% of babies are born with a cord around their neck, and it's not a cause for issue, like a cause for concern. But Albert's was very long. It was not coiled properly, so it was quite flat. And then because it looped around twice, it then compressed against itself, so cut off oxygen. And they estimate he would have died maybe 12 hours before I went into natural labour. It was so dark a time, and especially being on Boxing Day, you know, the day after Christmas, it's just, that's a time when everyone gets together and time with families. Yeah, it's hard. But yeah, I felt really held by my community. We had a meal train that went for like 4 months. It was crazy.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, and people coming and, you know, picking up George and taking him to special places so he wouldn't notice. Everyone was amazing. And Bob and I decided straight after Albert that we wanted to try again. We had this huge hole, this baby-shaped hole in our heart that we needed to fill. So we started trying again. And about 6 months later, I fell pregnant, and I had my first chemical pregnancy. So I lost the baby, I think, between 6 and 8 weeks. And I sort of told myself that was, you know, everyone needs to have a miscarriage. 1 in 4 pregnancies end in miscarriage. That was normal. My body wasn't ready yet. And I'd try again. I fell pregnant again. And I made it to 10 weeks and I got the nip. We found out we were having another boy. And it was amazing. And, you know, I'm a mum of boys. I only have boys. I love boys. And then I felt something wasn't right one day at work. And I thought I'll just finish the shift off and then I'll go into Coffs Hospital and just get an ultrasound. And I went into the emergency department. I was there at about 5:30 p.m. And after tests and, you know, sitting in the waiting room with by myself for hours, at 3 a.m. I found out that I'd lost the baby at 11 weeks. But my body wasn't letting go, so it was a miscarriage. And so that was just another hurdle, heartbreaking hurdle of having to, like, another period of pregnancy also, like, losing, you know, I'd had the early miscarriage, I've had like the later miscarriage, and then to have, and stillborn as well. And my body didn't get rid of, like, I don't know what the right word is, discharge.
Did you have to go in for a DNC?
I took the medication and that worked well, but you know, they wanted me to stay in hospital in the maternity ward, and I just said I can't.
Yeah.
So I went home, and I'm not sure if that was easier, but I birthed. I named him because I knew his gender, and so I called him Fox. Because George, my 6-year-old, always said we're going to have a foxy baby next. Yeah. Yeah. And so then I thought I didn't want to try anymore. But then after one cycle, I fell pregnant again.
And so that was a surprise.
Yeah. 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 And I had a support of an amazing obstetrician this time. So I, was taking aspirin and progesterone and being seen more regularly. And I'm not sure if that's the reason that this pregnancy survived, but I made it to almost full term. I actually opted to get induced at 37 plus 4 because of my fear around stillbirth. I had more trust in the hospital keeping my baby alive than I did in my own body. Mm-hmm. Freddie's pregnancy was good up until about 35 weeks. I got influenza, was hospitalised for 3 days with suspected sepsis. I was so sick, I could barely move for 3 days and so dehydrated. And when I was in hospital, I kept saying, is my baby going to be okay? And everyone said they're in this nice, protected environment. And I was feeling so sick because I was taking it all for the baby. Yeah. And I was happy to hear that. It was reassuring.
Did they do scans when you were in the hospital?
Yeah. So I had almost constant CTG monitoring on. And I would get one every time I requested it.
Yeah.
I didn't have... I can't remember if I had an ultrasound. I don't think I had one in hospital, but they did send me to Newcastle to maternal fetal medicine in Newcastle to do a scan to make sure that everything was okay. Again, just based on my history. Yeah. And I had a fight with one of the obstetricians there because she didn't understand why I wanted to be induced.
Okay.
And I just said, got so much anxiety. My mental health is suffering. I just want my baby to be here and safe and in my arms. And she said that, lightning never strikes twice. This won't happen again. That was just bad luck. And that she dealt with these cases all the time and that everything would be fine. And so for my induction, I went in the night before. I'd never been induced before, so it was a big thing for me.
That's probably an anxiety moment as well.
Yeah. I was fairly confident though, because everyone's like, 5th child, your body's just going to take over and know what to do. But my body did not. It was not happy. So I had 2 attempts at the tape, which was unsuccessful. So it was 7 o'clock on the Monday morning on the 16th. I went in to the birthing suite and had the drip inserted and had my waters broken.
I've heard the drip is also a really painful and crazy experience in itself.
Yeah. They started very slowly, so I felt like I was in control to begin with, but I didn't feel like my body progressed the way it normally would in labour. Yeah. And so I felt like I needed to push a lot earlier on, and my cervix was only like 4 or 5 centimetres. My drip, I think, started at 8 a.m. in the morning, and at 5 o'clock I was still 5 centimetres, and normally my labours had been 3 hours. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I my waters got broken. Yeah. So at 5 o'clock there was some problems with the heart, like Freddie's heartbeat was showing signs of stress. And I had the same midwife again. I had Madee to follow me through our journey again. And she was saying, I was saying to her and to the doctor, I'm not here for my dream birth. I'm here for a baby. I don't care how much intervention. Yeah. If there's a problem, like if we're wondering if he's stressed from a heartbeat, take me for a Caesar, prep me for a Caesar. I don't want to risk anything. And they, within minutes, so I'd already had an internal, and they said I was 5 centimetres and to not push, and so I was trying not to push, and then my body just took over and I said I can't not push. I was laying on my back, so that's normally I birth either on my knees or standing up, but I was laying on my back trying to stop and I couldn't stop it. Wow. And they checked me again and I was 10 centimetres in a matter of minutes. So my pushing was 7 minutes of Freddie being born. Wow. So he made a very, very quick entrance into the world. Wow. And as a result, I had a very bruised head. But again, I was told that was quite normal. He was jaundice as well. So straight after birth, he had to have oxygen. Bob was able to cut the umbilical cord, and then I had a very quick cuddle, but then he wasn't crying well, so they took him still in the room, but gave him some oxygen. And then after 30 minutes decided to take him into the special care nursery. And I followed him. Well, Bob and George went with him. George was present for the whole labour. I should have said that to him. Apparently he was sitting on the couch while Freddie was being born, eating a jelly cup like it was just a movie.
Was he watching or was he just... Wow.
Yeah, he was watching.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just a normal day with Mum.
Yeah. Yeah, I liked having... My teenagers opted out of this one because I think it was they're a bit older now, and
I'm sure there was probably also a bit of fear for them as well.
Yeah, definitely some trauma. Yeah. So Freddie and I spent, I think, 3 days in special care. We had to be under lights and things, but we finally got discharged, and it was, the last time we did that walk out of Crofts Maternity, we left without a baby. We left with a teddy bear. And this time we were leaving with a baby, and it was just incredible. We went, so that was the Friday that we went home. And we spent the weekend just at home. We didn't get out very much, taking it slow. And then Monday we decided to go out we went to Bunnings to buy a tree to plant on top of my placenta. And just to do some food shopping. We didn't go very far. And then we had a fantastic day. We actually went out for dinner too. A nice day with the whole family. We got home and Freddie had a bath at about 8:30, and he was letting out healthy screams, and he seemed fine. And then I dressed him and I wrapped him, and I went to breastfeed him to put him to sleep. And he was stiff. He was grey. I didn't know what had happened. I thought he'd stopped breathing. And I unwrapped him so quickly and ran to Bob screaming, saying he's not breathing. And I remember Bob's response was just like, "You're fucking kidding." Just like, how could this be happening? And at that point, I was like, why don't I know CPR? Why haven't I learned? And Bob called the ambulance really quickly, but being in Bellingen, you don't know how far away an ambulance is. It could be 3 minutes, it could be 3 hours. And so we made that split-second decision to jump in the car and drive to Bellingen Hospital, where there was a gamble whether there'd even be a doctor there, because sometimes there's not. And we got there right on shift changeover. So we had double staff. We had double. Everyone was there. I was banging on the door was locked, and I had one boob still hanging out and banging on this glass door saying, "My baby's not breathing." And this man came running and press the emergency. I remember him slamming the call button as he was coming, and all these people started running. And it was just amazing. Like within minutes, this one doctor in this tiny little country town had video setups, and all the nurses were doing exactly what they needed to do. They started calling in people from different areas. We had a paediatric team arrive from Lismore via helicopter that landed on the Oval. We had another team of paediatrics come from coughs. I actually had this one special paediatrician who, she didn't look after us in coughs, but I met her in coughs, and I shared my story with Albert about Albert and why Freddie was so special to her. And she wasn't in the ambulance, but she managed to get a police escort, and she drove to Bellingen. She said 190 kilometres down the highway to be there.
Wow.
And she was the hero of the night. She managed to intubate Freddie and get him on life support and get him stable enough so then we could transport him to Coffs, where they had better equipment and could help him more. So in Bellingen, I think there would have been 100 people in this emergency room, just for this one tiny baby. And yeah, I don't know if Bellingen Hospital has ever seen an operation like that. It was incredible. So after he was intubated, we presented at Bellingen Hospital probably about 9 o'clock. He was stable enough to be transported at 1:30 a.m. And again, my midwife, Madee, was there to support me. And Bob and George at that point went home to get some sleep because we knew we were going to go to a major hospital that day. And so I went by ambulance. We had a 4-ambulance convoy and got to Coffs, and they continued to work on Freddie. At this stage, they had no idea what it was, why. They just thought maybe he had a seizure condition. But they'd given him every antibiotic that they could possibly think of just to try and cover anything. And they engaged the NETS team and so we caught a helicopter at 7 a.m. to Newcastle. That was an experience. It was a beautiful day. And just flying over the ocean with my baby. I think at this point I was still delirious. Just hadn't slept. Was still on a high of having a baby.
Yeah.
And we spent a week in Newcastle thinking everything's fine. Within 2 days of him getting there, they diagnosed him with meningitis, which is a brain infection that had gone septic. Yeah, and so we had a week of hope. He'd been given the right antibiotics at Bellingen Hospital, so they were onto it, and they continued to do that. And he was on so many medications, and we're just sitting there watching all the brain activity on all the screens and just everything buzzing and beeping. It was a wild experience. And then one day we came in and his head circumference had grown. And so they called an emergency MRI. And then that was on, I think, a Monday. And we didn't find out too much information, but we thought that something was wrong because after the MRI, we kept asking for results and people kept sort of brushing us off to someone else, like they didn't want to tell us the news. And then the doctors called a meeting on Tuesday and said, basically, the infection was too big and the antibiotics hadn't worked. And the reason his head was getting bigger was because of the infection and the fluid on his brain. Yeah, but he was on life support, so he was still living. And every now and then he'd open his eyes and you'd sort of wonder, like, are they telling the truth? Is he definitely brain dead? And we started thinking about what our life would look like if Freddie stayed with us. They said that he'd have cerebral palsy, he'd be wheelchair bound, and the parts of his brain where he wouldn't be able to show emotion, he wouldn't be able to eat or do anything for himself. And then it came to the point where he wouldn't even be able to breathe by himself. And so at that point, we got moved into the bereavement suite at Newcastle, which not every hospital has a bereavement suite. I know Coffs doesn't. They asked me, or they didn't ask, they offered that I could stay with Albert after I had him, but it was just, how could I stay in maternity with all these mums?
I'm sure lots of baby sounds.
Yeah. It's just not fair that that's where you should be, even after a miscarriage. That's where it's just. But at Newcastle, in their NICU, they had a bereavement room, and it was still on the same floor, but it was set up to have a little kitchenette, and it had a queen bed, and it had an ensuite and all the equipment for Freddie, and beautiful windows we could see outside, because the last room we couldn't see outside. And you go days where you're like, what date? Like, what time is it? Yeah. And so the bereavement room was really nice, and we slowly took equipment away from Freddie. The doctor sort of pushed us a little bit, which was hard, but I think helping us make the decision, because ultimately, in the end, we had to turn off the life support. And taking little monitors away was helpful. It was so funny, every day the doctors would do their rounds and they'd come in and be like, what are the plans for today? Like, what day is your baby dying? It's just,
You're like, can't I just have one day undisturbed?
I was just sitting there going, I wish Freddie could make this decision for me. Why does this have to be our decision? This feels so strange, making that call. And they were just very clinical about it. And we had all the facts. We had multiple people look at the MRIs. We had so many people around us, so much support from immunologists and geneticists and all the top pediatricians. It was amazing. And neurologists too. And so we decided that on his third week, around him, he was born at 5:18 p.m. on a Monday. So at about 5:15, we decided to turn it off and take his tubes out. And everyone said it would be, or everyone thought it was going to be a quick process because he wasn't breathing by himself. But he went on to live hours. Wow. And that was so nice because he had, besides a PICC line that he was receiving morphine and any pain relief from, he had nothing on his face. He was still warm. I was able to cuddle him and just love him. And we sat and we, watched the sun set. We ordered sushi. Like Uber Eats, and the nurses went down and got it for us, and we just sat there and just hung out as a family. George was there. He wasn't there when we took the tubes out, but he came in shortly after when we realised that, Freddie wasn't suffering. It wasn't traumatic. Yeah. And then I can't actually remember the exact time, but I remember in your podcast you talking about, or your experience, about feeling Dash leave. And I had that exact feeling. And I felt his body sort of get heavier. And he looked different. And I was like, you're not here anymore. And yeah, I knew. And then we just stayed in the room. We just hugged him, loved him, slept with him. We got up in the morning, we bathed him, we dressed him, we just hung out. And then I walked in down to the morgue. And I remember them offering that to me early on. And then when I took them up on the offer, they were like, oh, okay, you do want to do that, are you sure? And so I had to protect everyone else, so I had to wrap him up and face him towards me and walk. But it was so nice because people were just smiling at me like I just had a baby. Mm-hmm. And for that last moment, I got to walk and be like, this is my baby. He's with me, he's not invisible. People can see him. And yeah, and we walked him down to the morgue. And then he stayed there one night, and then he was transported back to Coffs, and we travelled back on the same day. I was able to do so much more with Freddie because with Albert, I would think I was in so much shock, where Freddie, I was able to think about what I wanted. So we organised impressionable kids to come, and so Freddie was dropped off at Keith Logue's, a local funeral service, and I met Jamie from Impressionable Kids there, and I was able to do the castings of Freddie, which I didn't do with Albert. And George helped take some fingerprints for fingerprint jewellery. Okay. And yeah, that was the last time I saw him. Yeah. Again, we're being so supported by our community. Like when those helicopters started coming over a small town, Facebook just went crazy. Okay. Yeah. And then my beautiful god sister, so her parents are my godparents, she organised a GoFundMe, which originally was just to help us stay with Freddie because our first news was 3 weeks and we'll be back home. But then it turned into 2 weeks in Newcastle and he wasn't coming home. But yeah, the support has been incredible. I still wake up every single day wondering why this is my story. I have so many questions like, where did he get meningitis from? Why didn't the antibiotics work? And I don't know if I'll ever get an answer. There's so many questions that come
when you go through a loss in general, but with babies, it's like you have so much promise and hope because they're a new life, that their life will be long, that nothing could be wrong with them because it's fresh and it's new. And yeah, to face all of these different infections and meningitis, it's just like, yeah, where did it come from? How did that happen? Yeah, of course. Yeah. Did they say that they thought it had anything to do with the bruising on his brain when he was first born? Or?
Well, now that I think about it, I look back at photos and I wonder if he was healthy when he left hospital.
Yeah.
When he was discharged, he wasn't feeding very well. He was jaundice, but again, it was fifth baby, and I think I was just so excited to take him home. Yeah. My fear was based around those last few weeks of pregnancy, not the first few weeks of life. Yeah. But now, looking back on it, I wonder if he had that infection from utero, but because he was jaundice, the symptoms were
masked or something.
Yeah, or they just put it down to jaundice.
Yeah.
And then didn't investigate any further.
Do you feel like when you lean into that, is there like a bit of anger or upset in the staff for not taking that more seriously?
Yeah. I think I felt like the midwives were amazing. I felt like they were very understaffed and stressed. They were overworked. They weren't getting proper breaks. I often heard people talking about doing double shifts or not being able to go to the toilet. So I felt like they did their best, but I do feel let down from the doctors. They like every baby's important and special, but it was kind of really important that our family got a baby this time.
Yeah.
And I made decisions that I thought would be the best for my baby because I said I'd lost trust in my body.
Yeah.
And yeah, but now I question all that as well. My decisions of being induced early. Was his immune system not ready for this world?
It's so hard to know, and I don't think you can put that on yourself, and I know how hard that is because I live that all the time. And it's one of those things that if you put it on yourself, you'll eat yourself alive with worry and guilt. Yeah. And I don't think Freddie, honestly, I really don't believe either of your babies would ever want that for you.
No.
I think there's so many ways, even when you were talking about Albert and you said he had the nuchal cord and they'd picked it up on the scan, my mind immediately, my first thought was like, what if someone would have said, oh, this is a nuchal cord and like, we should take this more seriously and like, I would recommend doing a C-section. Like, if you would have been open to that in that moment, if someone would have even offered it, but no one told you it was even a cause for concern. So often these things are missed in scans or they're picked up in scans, but they're not like developed in the way that they should be because the scans aren't perfect and they can't exactly determine. And, I think you made every best decision that you could based on your previous experience losing Albert to do everything in your power to make sure that Freddie would be safe when he was born.
Yeah.
And I would hate for you to put that on yourself that you rushed him or that maybe he wasn't ready, because I think that you were trying to do everything you could to make sure he was there, but just sometimes it's out of our control.
Yeah. I tell myself every day, like, you make the best decisions for our babies at the time.
Yeah.
And I suppose what we know now, but I'm not sure what I'd do next time.
Yeah. Do you feel like there would be a next time, or is it just completely...
We would love to have another baby. It's just so scary.
Yeah.
And it's just weighing up that the fear of not trying again or the fear of trying. Both of them hurt. Yeah. I'm grateful that I've got my other children. They keep me alive. They keep me going. Yeah. Yeah. So,
how far into your most recent postpartum are you now?
Freddie would have been 5 months last weekend on the 16th.
He was born a month after Dash.
Is Dash the 16th?
16th of August.
Oh.
I bet they're up there right now hanging it together. Sitting on the floor over here and watching this.
Yeah.
I picture it anyway.
Yeah. I like to think of the same things. Rainbows and clouds, and when we die, there's just going to be all these little voices that we haven't heard before just running towards us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what would what would be the most helpful things that you've found? I know, obviously, going through the loss the first time, it's so shocking, and there's a lot that is just unknown territory. And now you know everything that you have to endure and that is coming, and they're also quite close to one another, so there's also a lot of the unknown that will come as well. But
Yeah.
what have been some of the things that were most helpful for you when you first lost Albert and losing Freddie?
As in regards to like how the community helped,
Community, what helped your body as well, like move through it?
Coming back from having Freddie, from Albert, I learned not to run. I felt like I ran away from that situation. And I just wanted to get out of that hospital and go and cuddle my living babies. And so I didn't do a lot of the, I didn't spend a lot of time with them. I didn't do all the things. So that was a big thing with Freddie. And I would just say, take all the photos and do all the imprints and, spend again with Freddie. I didn't take him home like you did with Dash. And I listened to that and I just thought that was so beautiful that you had him in your home. My boys only came home in their urns. They, as the community, like how they helped, grief groceries was probably the best thing. Just someone doing a Coles or Woolworths order and just appearing on your doorstep was incredible. It taught me so much about how I could help other people. And you really notice that the people that help you the most, the kindest people, are the people that have felt the trauma. They know what to do. So now I feel fully equipped to help someone.
I've experienced that too, like the people that showed up for us the most, even strangers that we didn't know, were all people that experienced deep trauma and deep grief.
Yeah.
And some of the people that were closest to me in my life, or that I'd known longer, like just didn't know how to show up or didn't at all.
Yeah.
And I think that, these experiences make us lean into our community more in support and of service when they're experiencing the things, because in your heart how it feels to be in that position.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you lost friends? Like you felt distance between?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, even this morning we were in town and a woman that I know who I had been friends with for many years and would definitely know my face, looked at me and I smiled and she looked away. And I was really surprised by it because it wasn't something that I would have expected from her.
Yeah.
And there's been people that have come back into my life through the loss, and there's been people that have completely distanced. And that's an impossible thing to navigate because you're like, but I didn't do anything wrong. And I think it's simply just too confronting for them, or they don't know how to sit with big emotions.
Yeah.
And that those, especially some of them that are mothers, the mothers that have distanced themselves feels the most painful.
Yeah.
But I think it's really because they can imagine what it would be like not to have their child in their life anymore.
Yeah.
And then it's too much to sit with someone who has that. You know, whenever I talk about my child, there's always grief attached to it. And there's joy as well, for sure. But there's so much fear to sit with me that I might say something that will trigger them, or it's too dark and maybe they just want to be experiencing joy and happiness and like watching their baby grow up who's healthy and happy and alive. And I'm like, I didn't get that this time round, but I still want to be in your life.
Yeah.
So, have you had that kind of experience as well?
Yeah, I felt the same. Yeah, losing some people, just feeling like I'm too much. But I suppose I've got to appreciate that too, that some people just don't have the capacity to take on other people's problems.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's hard, isn't it?
It's really hard.
Yeah.
What have been some of the most helpful things that people have said to you, and unhelpful things? What to say, not to say to a bereaved mother. Part 1.
Oh, yeah. Well, number one, everything happens for a reason.
Oh.
Which is something that I actually used to say before this happened.
Yeah.
And I've turned around to people that have said that to me. And I've said, do you really think that I'm that bad of a person that I deserve this?
Yeah.
And they stop and they go, oh. But that's probably the most hurtful. At least you've got other children.
Yeah, any sentence that starts with at least, don't at least. At least you can try. At least you can try again. At least you have other children. At least it's not helpful.
No.
At all.
No.
It's so hurtful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
So the most helpful things is probably just people allowing me to be who I am. And in social situations, I'll turn up and I'll try and be my old self, but then something will bring up a memory and I'll just want to talk about it. And just being able to sit in that conversation, you know, how you said it does bring you joy. Talking, like, you know, these people have memories of their kids doing all these firsts and we don't have that. We just have the one story that we can tell over and over again. But it's nice to talk about them. I feel like sometimes it's harder to parent a dead child than it is to parent living children.
Yeah. My friend said that to me the other day, who lost her twin boys. She said the same thing, you know, it's a lot bigger to parent a spirit child.
Yeah.
And she has a 2-year-old son as well. And she's like, it's so much bigger.
Yeah.
Because your living children start to become their own people and they start to take care of themselves, but you're still taking care of your children that are spirits. And you were just constantly imagining caring for them and thinking of them and imagining what their life would have been like.
Yeah.
I'd love to know a bit more about what Freddie and Albert were like and what you imagined for them. I know you mentioned they had different colours of hair, and
Yeah.
what were some of the features that you noticed and loved about them the most?
Freddie just looked like a little koala. He was so cute. He had this little like squashed and almost like dark nose because of the bruising, and super hairy. He was my smallest baby, but he was only 37.4 weeks. Yeah, he's. Gosh, I didn't spend enough time with him to know, like, I know what he looked like, but we weren't even in a routine yet. I was still trying to force feed him because he was jaundiced and because he was sleepy. It was alarms constantly every 3 to 4 hours, get up, feed, express. Yeah, and Albert, he was my biggest baby. And he didn't have as much hair. He was much lighter. His lips went really bloodshot really quickly. So they were really red. I was almost, with Albert, I was almost scared to touch him. It was a really different experience having it like twice, because with Freddie I just wasn't scared, you know. I'd been there before. Yeah.
What would be some of the things that you would recommend for mothers who are going into pregnancy and birth to put on a death plan? Because I think what I'm seeing is so many people just planning for birth and a healthy, happy baby, but when it happens, and it does unfortunately happen, that sometimes our babies pass, we're deeply unprepared for it. And I guess from your experience, what would be some of the things you'd recommend to put on a death plan?
This sounds like a funny one, but having a good midwife. My midwife was just worth her weight in gold.
Yeah, shout out to Madee. Yes. Sounds amazing.
She is. I was so worried that I'd ruined her career after Freddie, because I was like, oh, 2 is a lot. 2 is a lot for a family. 2 is a lot for a midwife. But I don't even know if I'd be prepared myself. I engaged. I had my friend call the funeral homes after Albert. I didn't do it, and then I ended up just picking the first one that she called. And then after Freddie, I called them up. I made a really awful joke, something along the lines of multi-buy. And I was like, can I have a discount for a second one?
Oh. The dark humour comes through a lot. It's
my therapy, I think. Yeah, so I'm not sure. I'm just make all the memories. You know, do the belly casting, take the photos, be surrounded by people that you trust. I think if you've got the right people around you in your birth circle, then you probably have the right people around you in your death. Yeah, but I'd almost be inclined to say, would you want to prepare, or would you want to go blissfully unaware that this might happen to you too? I often, we talked earlier about Albert's nuchal cord and whether someone said something. Yeah, I often think about what my decision would have been And I think at that time I probably would have opted for no intervention because, yeah, I had trust, but now I've lost that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that trust is so hard to rebuild.
I don't think it will ever come back. Even now, I wonder if I'll ever have another healthy baby. It seems too good to be true, even though it happens to everyone else. It's funny, you can look at other people and go, yeah, they're due soon, they're going to have a baby. And that's just the normal timeline.
I currently am going through that, looking at people that can have a baby soon, and as horrible as this is, but I often look around and I think, will any of them die?
Yeah.
And
who's next?
Yeah, I'm like fearful for the next person that this happens to, because it caught me off guard completely. And yeah, even like what you were saying before about your other children and that fear of, will something happen to them? Will they pass? And how will I move through that? I think that about everyone in my life. Even, Tom, like there's been moments where I haven't been able to get onto him and my brain doesn't go to a normal place. It just immediately goes, he's died.
Yeah.
He's died and I'm going to have to live with this now and I have to move through this.
Yeah.
And prior to the loss, like I'd never be that way. I'd just be like, well, he's probably forgotten his phone or he's, catching up with someone or something. But there's like this extreme level of paranoia now that people around me are going to die suddenly.
Yeah.
And without warning. And yeah, building that trust back up that doesn't exist right now is a big
thing.
Yeah.
I remember we flew to Perth a couple of years ago for a friend's wedding. And I remember sitting on that. This was before Freddie. So I just had Albert. And sitting on that plane going, okay, if we all crash and die, at least we're together. At least we're not leaving anyone behind because my entire family is on this plane.
Yeah.
That's such a bizarre thought.
Well, you've lived through some really, really big trauma and your brain is just obviously now trying to prepare you for anything.
Yeah.
Like if you can think it and it could happen. Whereas before it's like it never crossed your mind that it could happen.
Yeah.
And it's like you're almost trying to make peace with it before it does, just in case.
Yeah.
Yeah. How has the experience been for your husband, Bob, and for your two older boys? Well, all three of your boys, but your two older boys who are a little bit more aware, I guess.
They, I suppose with Bob, it's been hard. He hasn't had as much support as I have. Females can hold space better than males. I'm sorry. So that's been difficult. He did also just start to go out on his own bits for his own business. He's a carpenter. But he joined up with a friend from TAFE, who we'd had babies at the same time. So I wasn't sure if he was going to go back to work or what that was going to look like. But he went back to work with his co-worker who had a healthy baby. And he's doing quite well. Yeah, and he gets a lot of satisfaction out of working, and him and Joel are a good team. And I think Joel's really supportive of Bob. But besides that, it's been challenging.
Yeah.
And it's challenging being in a relationship, going through that and especially like with other kids, trying to hold. You both can't break down at once. Someone's sort of got to hold the fort, which is a blessing. It's definitely a good thing, but you have to navigate taking turns in breaking down, and arguments can happen easier. Yeah. So it has been really tough. after Freddie died, I actually turned around and said to him that he was stuck with me forever because we were going to be so messed up that no one would ever understand our grief. But yeah, then we did have some rough patches, but I think we're managing. But it's definitely hard for males. And again, with my teenagers, I've tried to put supports in place, those psychologists, and, you know, surround them by adults that love them. And I've got friends checking in on them too. When we'd just been out for dinner the night that Freddie got sick, and then it was literally like they had no idea what was wrong, and we just all ran out the door and we're like going to the hospital. And then I had to message them and say, you know, that he wasn't well, and my 15-year-old ran to the sports field where the helicopter was landing because he thought we were getting on it. And then I didn't see them for 2 weeks. I offered them to come to Newcastle if they wanted to, but I left that decision up to them, and they opted not to. I think it was just too hard for them. And I didn't want to push that. I said, you might regret it, but also it was, their decision. But yeah, they're okay. They're probably not the best versions of themselves, but at the moment,
It's hard.
Yeah. They're happy and healthy. And that's all I care about at the moment.
Of course.
Yeah.
And is George in a similar?
George has just started school.
Wow.
So he's just started primary school a few weeks ago. So he's got this whole new life.
It's probably a good distraction.
Yeah. Newcastle was great for George because we stayed at Ronald McDonald House, and he loved it. Like every day, well, we walked to the hospital probably 8 times a day, but he'd sit. There was this Ronald McDonald man sitting in like front of a seat.
Oh, and he'd sit with him every day?
Every day he'd sit there and tell him about his day.
Wow, cute.
Yeah.
But it was a statue or like an actual person dressed as Ronald McDonald?
Oh, no, it was a statue.
Okay.
It was just a statue sitting on a seat.
Amazing. I know what you're talking about. Yeah. But I was like, wait, do they have a real person every day?
Well, Ronald McDonald was amazing. The volunteers there and the staff there are incredible. You know, the rooms are so comfortable, and it's like 200 metres from the hospital. It's on the same ground, so we could just go back for a little bit of rest and then go back to the hospital. Felt like we weren't leaving the grounds. And just everywhere you went, there was people handing out presents and lollies, and it was a really good distraction for George. Yeah. And when we came back from Newcastle, he was quite emotional. But I think that was also he was out of routine. He just, didn't know what was going on. Yeah. But we still talk about them every day. I talked about packing them up and bringing them here today.
I'm sure it's, something that is also hard. And I know everywhere I go, I don't always bring Dash's ashes, but I'll always bring a photo of him and a candle that we light everywhere. So I've got, and his little teddy that he had. And so I know that feeling. I'm like, almost want to just take him everywhere with me every single day. And sometimes it's not the easiest to carry, obviously.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought them today.
Yeah. I would love to get some sort of like jewelry or some ash.
But there are some amazing companies that I've found that I'll send them to you because I don't remember the name of them, and I'll tag them in the show notes below as well if you're listening. But they make breast milk jewelry, ashes, and then the company that Tom and I got our palm prints through as well were incredible. And I know you mentioned that you got, Freddie's fingerprints done. So hopefully that's something that you can get made as well, because this keeps me going all day. I can just hold on and know that I'm holding his little hand. And
and I love the star. It's gorgeous.
It's so special.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Madee.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, of course. Is there a good way that people can reach out to you if they want to connect with you?
I would love to connect with more mothers. I suppose Instagram.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. I can tag that in the show notes as well.
Perfect.
Yeah. Thank you so much, honestly.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure.